What's up, guys? Today's video is over Royal Giant strategy. I suggest that people use Royal Giant, especially if you're free to play or don't spend much money on the game, because it's a common card and it's very easy to upgrade. The Mortar and the Elite Barbs are also kind of win conditions that are commons, but in my opinion, the Royal Giant's the better way to go because the Mortar has a lot of counters and really the Elite Barbs do too. So I flashed up quite a few Royal Giant decks. This one coming up right here is my favorite Royal Giant deck, and it works very well. So you might want to try it if you're interested in using the Royal Giant. So the perks to the Royal Giant are that it's a common card. It has a good amount of HP. It outranges a lot of different buildings. It does decent damage, and then once again, it's a common card. That's probably the best thing about the Royal Giant. You can easily upgrade it very high. The bad stuff about the Royal Giant is that it's high cost. It doesn't have as much HP as a Giant or other big tanks, and counter pushes can be very difficult to defend with the Royal Giant. I don't know why that is. I guess it's because the Golem gets to splash some of the troops whenever it's going down, and the Giant costs less. So, how to use the Royal Giant? The main thing that you want to focus on when you put down your Royal Giant, they are going to obviously defend it, and usually there's going to be a counter push that's going to be difficult to defend. And so you're going to need to have good defensive troops in your deck in order to deal with pretty big counter pushes. Some good defenses to big counter pushes are Barbarians, Valkyrie, Elite Barbarians, and some other splash units. I like Barbarians a lot because there's the 4 Barbarians and they do some pretty high DPS. So make sure not to overextend on offense, because if you overextend on offense, you won't have enough elixir to deal with the big counter push, and that's the biggest downfall for a Royal Giant deck. So if your Royal Giant is getting taken out by a group of Barbarians or Skeleton Army or some group of troops, you're going to want to use a splash support unit behind it. If it's getting attacked by a melee troop like a Lumberjack or Mini P.E.K.K.A., use a strong point support troop like a Musketeer or Mega Minion. Just use a good support unit that does high DPS to 1. You can use splash, but I suggest high point support units. Ranged defenses and buildings are the hardest thing to battle against with a Royal Giant. So in order to get more value, you want to either send in a group of troops like Barbarians in front of it, or sometimes you can use your spell like Fireball or lightning whatever defense it is to get it out of the way. Yeah, right here lightning can do very well with Royal Giant because it does a lot of damage to Inferno Towers, Inferno Dragons, and kills lots of the like Musketeers and Wizards and Ice Wizards. So lightning synergizes very well. I personally use Fireball and Zap, but that's just how I play it. So the top counters are Barbarians, Elite Barbarians, Mini P.E.K.K.A., Inferno, both Inferno, Dragon Tower, P.E.K.K.A., Lumberjack, Musketeer, Mega Minion, and there are some others. The Skeleton Army could be good against it, but I assume that you should be able to easily get rid of a Skeleton Army because, I mean, a Zap, in my opinion, Skeleton Army is way too fragile of a card now. So, against Barbarians, I usually just sit back and play defense. You can use a splash support unit on that if you want. Elite Barbarians, I sit back on that too. It's hard to protect your RG from them because splash units won't splash both of the Elite Barbarians. So sit back and just let your Royal Giant do a little bit of damage and then focus on your defense. Against Mini P.E.K.K.A., use a high DPS support troop. I would use minions. That's what's in my deck. Musketeer, some other thing just to kind of whittle down its health a little bit. Against an Inferno Dragon, I like to counter push. So if I've successfully defended with some barbarians and maybe three of them are left with some health, I'll put them in front of my Royal Giant so that the Inferno Dragon will be distracted. And then with Inferno Tower, it's pretty much the same thing. You can always put healthy barbarians or healthy troops in front of the Royal Giant too if you want, but sometimes that can uh, not get too much value, so be careful with that. And another thing, I use minions, like I said, the three minions. Sometimes you can, if they place the Inferno down the middle, you can place your minions down the middle and it'll distract the Inferno for a little bit. So P.E.K.K.A, there's not a whole lot you can do. Once again, just sit back. You can do a high point support unit like minions or musketeer or something to take down its health a little bit, but there's not a whole lot you can do against a P.E.K.K.A. Lumberjack, once again, use a ranged support troop. Um, you can always put the barbarians or the counter stuff in front of the. You can just shove the Royal Giant in right as the barbarians, or just whatever troops you have coming over. If you're using Valkyrie and it has a little life left, just throw your Royal Giant right behind it. So if they're using a musketeer to defend, I would use your spell most likely. Sometimes if they place it in a bad spot, you can use your ranged support unit to take it out, but most of the time you'll have to use a spell. Mega Minion, you can use a spell, but ranged support troops are usually what's going to be best because the Mega Minion will be relatively close to the bridge. So, the best spells with the Royal Giant, in my opinion, are Fireball, Zap, Log, and Lightning. And I would say that you need to combo one of either the Log and the Zap with one of the others. I wouldn't do Lightning and Fireball because they're just really high cost, and I don't like that. You can do it, but I don't think it'll work out as well. And also, I don't think I would do Log and Zap because those are a little too low cost, so just kind of switch it up. So an important thing to remember is that it's more like a chip deck. You're not going to be taking the tower out in one push usually. So sometimes you just got to cut your losses and play defense because they might have multiple counters to your Royal Giant, and you just gotta sit back and play defense and just try to chip off as much damage as you possibly can with your Royal Giant. So another thing, I want to just go back to defense real quick, or no, I want to talk about getting more value out of your Royal Giant. So if you defend, like I said earlier, my example was barbarians. We'll use elite barbarians this time. If you have both elite barbarians and one is half health, one has like 25% health, you can put your Royal Giant down right as they're crossing the bridge, and that'll help out against just about anything. If it's a P.E.K.K.A, it'll take a couple extra swings from the P.E.K.K.A, so the Royal Giant might get another shot off or maybe two. Against a mini P.E.K.K.A, same thing. Any melee troop. An Inferno, it'll distract that. Inferno Dragon, it'll distract that. Counter pushing with a Royal Giant is I love to do it. It's very helpful. I use the knight sometimes in front of it. The minions you usually try to get behind it, but barbarians, knight, Valkyrie, just troops that you can counter push with. Just throw your giant behind those troops coming down the lane, and it'll allow your Royal Giant to get more damage on the tower. Another thing, defense, like I said earlier, you've really got to focus on defense because counter pushes are probably the most difficult thing about Royal Giant decks. Like I said earlier, I'm not totally sure why that is. The Giant has more health, and I guess it costs less. And maybe sometimes people use poison with it, so it takes down some of the defensive troops. And Golem does some splash to the defensive troops. So, I mean, just be ready for the counter push because that's, like I've said multiple times, it's the downfall of the Royal Giant. You gotta have some heavy defensive troops and you should be fine. Just focus on chipping, focus on defending, and then you also want to make sure you get good value out of your Royal Giant. The scariest thing to play is probably an Inferno Tower or a really good cannon, or just someone with a building who's a real good player with that certain building and then also has another troop hitting your Royal Giant. You want to make sure you are careful of that. You can always fireball or lightning those buildings if you need to. Okay guys, the fun fact for today is that if you took all of the DNA strands out of a human body, it would stretch from Earth to the Sun and back 70 times. Now here's just a recap of the video. You've got to get consistent damage, play good defense, use the Royal Giant because it's a common, and counter push with your remaining defensive troops. Now I want to talk about the Royal Giant. A lot of people say that it's OP, it's unfair, and that it needs a nerf. But my response to that is to either use the OP card or to suck it up. And while we're on that subject, I think that the Elite Barbs, the Rocket, and the Ace of Spades are the closest things to needing to be taken out of their game. I think they all should and just be made Pokemon card or something, because I absolutely hate all of those cards, especially the Ace of Spades. It's lost me about $1,000 in poker, so. And I know what you guys might be thinking. You might be thinking, hey G&D, you just said either to use the OP card or to suck it up, but I don't care. These cards are the scummiest cards ever, so I mean, I think they should be taken out, but the Royal Giant's fine. This is the only instance where a card should be taken out. So, I hope you liked the video. Next one I think will be Golem, and just take care and keep watching if you want to. I'll try to keep helping out with strategy. See you later.